The Leather Ottoman by Carolyn L. Through the tall windows of my house on the Avenue Foch, I can see Paris awakening. A clutch of pigeons, startled by the creak of a handcart, are circling above the rooftops opposite. I have not slept again, as it is Tuesday, and Susanna will be bringing home the Leather Ottoman. On this occasion, today, I shall open it for myself and see at last what secret delights she has been keeping from me for all these months. The sun appears, sliding from behind a patch of cloud. I experience a thrill of anticipation, which sets my heart fluttering, and I light my first slender hoyo of the day. Outside, I hear the squeak of leather and the jangle of harness, the sharp tattoo of hoofbeats and a faint crunch of gravel. It is Susanna, returning from Montmartre, fresh and beautiful as ever. I pull back the brocade curtain and look down at her as the black coachman helps her alight. She wears scarlet silk trimmed with royal blue and a pretty bonnet covered with hyacinths. Her cheeks are flushed and her lips are gleaming wet. She runs her tongue quickly over their surface, and I groan aloud. I would give all my 4 limbs to taste that mouth just once more. Susanna has been my wife for 2 years now, and I feel no remorse in confessing that it has been a marriage of convenience, hers by large. I am wealthy, and of a certain age, whereas she is, or perhaps more correctly was, a poor girl, an orphan I found in Marseille. I was blinded with love and lust. She was seduced by my fortune and position, and so a match was made. At first she submitted to me as befitting a new bride, and I loved her with a passion so exquisite as to border on insanity. After a year, she became less overawed by her new wealth, and even critical of certain perceived defects in our domestic affairs. A cup was dashed to pieces because a maid had offered it with a minuscule speck of dust on the rim. Furniture was changed, curtains torn down, carpets sold for a fraction of their value to make room for even more exquisite pieces. She became uninterested in my physical advances, even though I had brought her to the zenith of sensual experience with my skill and impeccable devotion. It was as if she had drawn out of me all the techniques of passion, and now had no use for the empty, exhausted husk that remained. That she was unfaithful I had no proof, but her glowing flesh was treacherous witness to my gnawing fears. We slept in separate wings of my mansion, she claiming that my touch was now unpleasant to her, and that she had completely put aside the pleasures of the bedchamber. About a year previously, she had taken a sudden interest in theatrical costume, and now spent much time borrowing or buying fantastical gowns and headdresses from the more fashionable couturiers. She also purchased many tall-looking glasses in front of which she would pose, dressed as the Queen of Sheba, Cleopatra, or Jeanne d'Arc. Every Tuesday she would travel to Montmartre, and return an hour later with a large leather ottoman I had purchased earlier in our marriage. It was a fine piece, in a patchwork of multicolored hides, with the sides and lid framed by closely driven brass nails. The ottoman would be taken by a servant to her room, and she would lock herself away for several hours, crooning and laughing over its contents. Whenever I asked her if I might see what it was that so occupied her attention, she would react like a tigress, cursing me and screaming that I should let her alone, or she would leave me, literally, forever. So craven had I become at the thought of losing the mere sight of her, was too much to bear, and I meekly submitted to her demands for privacy, praying to heaven that she would stay and never desert me. Her obsession with theatrical raiment heightened, and extra rooms had to be made to accommodate the racks of dresses, high-heeled silver boots, ostrich feather boas, velvet cloaks, hat boxes, fans, long gloves, silk stockings, crates of stage jewelry, masks, and still more looking-glasses. Every Tuesday the ritual with the Ottoman took place, and Paris could set its clocks by it. Her coach, loaded with the empty Ottoman, would leave the house at 5 a.m. It would return at 6, the Ottoman lid strapped down securely, and she would spend until noon in her room, laughing and shrieking with delight, until the last stroke of 12 echoed through the house. Then the coachman would return the Ottoman to Montmartre, Susanna riding next to him, whip in hand, her eyes wild, her hair flying like a mane. They would arrive back at the house in time for luncheon, and the empty Ottoman would be flung into the hall until the following Tuesday. I suspected, indeed feared, madness in this irrational behavior, and I resolved to use guile to discover the secret of the trunk. Susanna's obsessive interest had made it routine that items of clothing were brought each Tuesday to the house, enjoyed for whatever her purpose, and then returned to Montmartre. Today, therefore, the masquerade will end. I am shivering with excitement in spite of the warm spring sunshine, and the cigar trembles in my hand. All has been prepared by Roe, my English manservant, who I know shares my concern with Susanna's condition. A clever two-way mirror has been substituted in the frame of one of Susanna's tall looking-glasses, its back positioned against the wall. A panel has been removed from the wall, and it is at this aperture that I now sit, tense and fearful. Susanna's own servant, a sullen Portuguese, admits her to the satin-draped room and withdraws, leaving her alone with the Ottoman. Susanna secures the door by means of a gold chain, and then double-locks it with a heavy brass key. I notice that she also drapes the keyhole with a piece of linen to prevent lynx-eyed peepers. As I relight my cigar, Susanna undresses herself feverishly, like a bride anticipating her wedding night. Her body gleams as she kneels naked in front of the Ottoman. I see the soft curve of her back, those perfect thighs, full breasts swelling, hair like a golden waterfall tumbling loose on her shoulders. She raises the lid of the Ottoman and pulls out what appears to be a tunic or frock coat. It is old and musty, with fraying lace cuffs and some dull braid at the lapels. She turns the garment towards her and loops the sleeves over her shoulders, leaving the unbuttoned front hanging against her body. I see her mouth working silently and her hands clutching at the back of the tunic. Slowly she falls until she is spread-eagled, with the garment covering her, her hips arching forward and upwards, an unmistakable pantomime that makes my senses reel. Moments later she is on her knees again, rummaging in the Ottoman, her face and body lathered with perspiration. This time she draws out a frilled shirt, yellowed with age, and begins to kiss it hungrily. Her tongue probes the buttonholes, and she presses the sleeves against her breasts. Once more she falls back, hugging the garment, and her body writhes like a serpent in a second awful convulsion. I have no wish to see any more of this madness, and I close the panel with my eyes weeping raw. An hour later I am sufficiently recovered to ask Roe to serve me with a pot of mint tea and a warm croissant. I issue him with an order that must be executed immediately. He is to follow Susanna's coach and discover the exact nature of the clothing in the Ottoman and where, precisely, she obtains them. He is apprehensive, but I threaten him with a return to his native England, a rural slum in Gloucester, with only pigs for company. His resolve to do my bidding stiffens immediately. It is now Wednesday, at 2 in the afternoon, and I feel calm, almost as Napoleon before a great and crucial battle. On the table beside me is a sheet of paper torn from a museum catalogue, and it contains the information I need to revenge myself upon Susanna for her treachery and unholy passion. The tunic with which she so lewdly entwined herself was once the property of Casanova, that Venetian satyr, and the shirt she covered with kisses was a favourite garment of none other than the legendary Don Juan. Rowe had no difficulty in persuading the owner of the small museum in Montmartre to reveal his stock in trade, clothing associated with the great lovers of history. Susanna's obsession with costume and her childlike make-believe had led to this shameful and degrading ritual, and I have no reason to believe her passion will do other than increase. The shame and hurt of being cuckolded by an empty jacket and a faded shirt is more than I can endure. To lose one's wife to the embrace of a ghost is a fate I cannot bear. But I have planned my revenge with meticulous care. No detail has been overlooked, no avenue left unexplored. Only a week must pass before my honour is restored and my satisfaction made complete. I ride daily in the Bois de Boulogne and dine late at Maxim's. As the days roll past, I am possessed with an almost exquisite sense of destiny, as if my whole life has been in preparation for what I am about to do. On Sunday I attend Mass at the Sacré-Cœur, and my coachman waits after the service while I stroll to the Place de Tertre and joke with the ragged artists who jostle in the tiny square. On Monday I dine early at Maxim's and drink a whole bottle of champagne, but my head remains clear, my senses razor sharp. Now it is Tuesday again, and the sky is brassy, disgorging rain that flays the cobblestones with whiplash strokes. My room is close and stuffy, and I have a pain that hammers in my temples and makes my eyes swim. Rowe has suggested I inhale from a bowl of hot water and eucalyptus, but I have no time for such trifles. The panel is removed, the looking-glass in position, and I am ready. Poorer, it is true, by 5,000 francs, but that was the price the museum keeper insisted upon to do my bidding. Well, in truth, as this is a record of actual events, the 5,000 francs was to partly compensate him for the fact that Rowe's method of persuasion included a sound thrashing with a coach whip. I cannot suffer the ignominy of a long legal wrangle, and the 5,000 should see that I don't have to. Rowe's brutality is a mild worry. He has offered to punish Susanna by peeling off her skin with a butcher's knife and sprinkling her raw flesh with pepper. I am not a savage, and I rebuke Rowe sternly. He pulls his forelock and grovels when I again threaten deportation to Gloucester. The museum keeper, speaking with difficulty through a mouth of broken teeth and blood, has also revealed that Susanna's craving for sensation has led her to read a number of ancient volumes about history's great lovers. It is from these vile reminiscences that she has formed her carnal association with their clothes. But I digress. The clock strikes 6. As its last note fades, I hear the familiar crunch of gravel and rattle of a harness. I am tempted to move to the window, but force myself to remain by the spy-hole. It is now that a worm of doubt uncurls itself in my brain. What if my plan fails? My unalienable right to justice will be thwarted, and I shall be a broken man. Perhaps I should let Rowe deal with it after all. He is at my shoulder now, breathing harshly, licking his big purple lips and rubbing his huge hands together. I snap my fingers and he takes a step back, a thread of saliva swinging from his jawbone. I hear the jingle of a lock, and the door of Susanna's room opens, slowly, admitting her Portuguese maid. She is followed by the coachman, who deposits the leather ottoman in the middle of the room. Susanna enters wearing a pale lavender dress, trimmed with creamy lace. I have not seen it before. She looks enchanting, and I feel a tear escape from my eye and run hotly over my cheek. The servants withdraw, and Susanna locks the door behind them. Once alone, her excitement mounts like a whirlwind, and soon she is naked, with her knees spread wide before the ottoman. She unlocks it, raises the lid, her tongue slicking over those angel lips, her body as tense as a wound spring. She reaches into the trunk and pulls out a long, dark coat with tarnished brass buttons. Lovingly, she holds it against her body, wrapping the black sleeves around her waist. I find myself catching my breath, and my heart pounds against my ribcage like a maddened beast. Slowly, Susanna sinks onto her back, stretching her limbs with the sensuous movements of a cat. I see her face as she rolls her head to one side. The lips are parted, her eyes closed. Suddenly, they snap wide open, and her legs flex, as if in paroxysm. A cry, almost a scream, escapes from her lips, and her fingers pluck at the coat in an attempt to tear it from her body. The garment, however, seems to cling to her, and she writhes and bucks, her face ragged with pain. I see her eyes bulge from their sockets, and a globule of crimson escape from the corner of her mouth. Now her movements are convulsive, involuntary, agonized. In the awful silence that follows, her face turns once more towards the mirror, and then vanishes beneath the dark folds of the coat. I wait, scarcely able to restrain myself from crying out. And then the awful tableau is quite still. I weep, my body shaking with silent sobs, and Roe offers me a glass of cognac, which I swallow in one gulp. Roe helps me to my feet, and together we walk slowly from the room and along the corridor to Susanna's bedroom. He opens the door with a duplicated key and smashes the bolt from its housing with a single blow of his fist. Inside, I kneel by the corpse of my wife and pull away the black jacket. Her poor eyes stare at me, and her purple tongue lolls grotesquely between swollen lips. On her alabaster throat are the deep bruise marks of strangulation. I throw the jacket into the ottoman and stand up. My tears have dried, and I feel exultant. Roe is stropping a big hunting knife on the sole of his boot, and I withdraw from the room, closing the door behind me. He knows what is to be done, and prefers to work alone. I return to my study and light a hoyo, sucking the smoke deep into my lungs. On the table next to me is a single sheet of paper torn from a printed catalogue. It reads, Exhibit 13, the frock coat worn by Gaston Desgrange, the mass murderer who, after strangling 7 young women in the Paris area, was guillotined in 1708. He insisted on kneeling before the basket, still wearing the coat, which was bequeathed to the museum by his mother. She claimed it had become imbued with evil and refused to keep it in her house. Now, to those who take a dullard's view of life, the above account might appear fanciful, a murderer's imagination, embroidering the facts so as to make it seem as if Susanna took her own life by some bizarre and magical ritual. However, it must be remembered that my wife was a woman already possessed by the spirit of her dead lovers, Casanova and Don Juan. Her subconscious mind acted as a medium for those lost souls, and they came to her eagerly. Although she embraced the counterfeit garment I had placed in the ottoman, her subconscious mind recognized the murderer's coat, acting as a spiritual magnet for the evil, tormented soul of Gaston Desgrange. So intense were her feelings that her death by strangulation was the inevitable climax to that awful pantomime. How so? Before you dismiss these words as the ravings of a mad and jealous man, a wicked husband, remember two things. Susanna had visited the museum in Montmartre many times. Her inflamed mental condition made her especially receptive to all the stimuli she received there. Her subconscious mind was indelibly imprinted with the images not just of her spiritual beau, but also of her spiritual murderer. Both, or all of them, were real to her. Finally, the skeptical reader may wish to remind himself of the proven phenomenon of those devout Italian nuns who so identified themselves with the crucifixion of Christ that wounds appeared on their hands and feet, and blood ran freely from their temples. At no time during these manifestations did any living person lay so much as a finger on them, but the mutilations were real enough. So it was with Susanna, and may God find peace for her wretched soul.